Okay, so be honest with me real quick. Have you ever been really jealous of someone else's sound or tone? And what piece of gear specifically were they using to get that green-eyed monster to just pop right out of you?
I, like 99% of guitar players, am not necessarily immune to this phenomenon. And there are definitely a few moments that stick out more than others, but one in particular sticks out sort of like a sore thumb.
You see, the moment had actually taken place about 2 years ago when one of my buddies from church was playing lead guitar. We'd hung out and jammed a couple times at his place, and he had showed me some of his insane collection because he was an actual touring guitar tech for like some pretty big artists. What I wanted to do was go up to him as always and say, bro, the licks were particularly tasty today, because he's an incredible player. So I get up out of my chair, I walk up to him, I'm like, bro, that was so legit. And he goes, Mike, I gotta show you the updates to the board. And of course, I'm immediately thinking to myself, what you talking about, Willis? You're currently playing guitar in a church setting. What'd you get, like a new Strymon Big Sky or some other delay pedal that I've seen a million different times on a million different boards? But then I look down and I see this black box, and he opens it and he goes, I got it. I finally got it. And I'm thinking to myself, you got what? So I ask him and he's like, dude, I finally got myself a quad Cortex. And I'm thinking to myself, a when, a where, a how, a why, a...
What you gotta know is that around this time is when I started to go through my sort of renaissance when it came to digital modelers. I'd spent years and years and years just hating them and hating the fact that anything other than a tube amp even existed. But once I started playing more and more in churches, I started seeing things like the Helix over and over and over again.
And I had to pretty quickly realize that the tones I was hearing, well, they were just kind of phenomenal. And my thought process pretty much did a full 360. Wait, cut that in half. More like a 180. Well, next thing you know, people might as well have called me the digital modeler fanboy because I was obsessed with these things. But if that were true and I was so invested, why had I never heard of this supposed big quad Cortex? And the only way I could textualize this in my mind was by thinking to myself, oh, it must be like a Helix or a Head Rush, but for a more niche audience. Now, eventually our conversation ended and I left, and I thought I would just forget about this thing, never think about it again. But as time began to pass and months began to move, I started to notice something. See, I would open up my laptop to watch a Corey Wong video, and on the ground, what do I notice but a quad Cortex? Looking up some live footage from Polyphia, what's the first thing I see front and center stage? A quad Cortex. Apparently my phone was just listening in extra hard that day. Now, eventually I had had just about enough, and I knew that some way or another I would have to try and get my hands on one of these to really see what I thought about it. And I had just more recently started doing these longer form gear reviews, so I thought to myself, it would be a really cool idea to sort of document my process of how I learned this machine. You know, show it was like using it for the first time. So of course I called up my buddy from church and I was all like,
What up, what up, what up? So you remember that quad Cortex that you just got and loved so much? How would you feel if I borrowed that for a moment?
and because I have some of the most gracious friends in this entire world, within the span of 48 hours, I had gone to his house, swooped it up, and brought it back here. So I walk through the front door and I put the box on this table and I start to take it out. And as I'm taking everything out, the anticipation just starts rising and rising. And I get more and more excited. And so I take out my XLR because it's line out. I plug it in for the first time. I pull out my guitar and I plug it in and I strum those first few chords, and immediately I notice, I'm not sure I quite like this sound. Now, thankfully for me, it turned out to be a false alarm because I realized I was standing way too far back from my speakers, and the second I got closer and could actually hear the sound, I was floored. I mean, the tone was so jaw-dropping, everything was so good, and I loved that machine so much that the rest of my project was pretty much done within the next 48 hours, but I knew the entire thing would be incomplete if I never at least tried to profile one of my amps that I had in here. Now, that may seem like a pretty simple task to most people, but to me, profiling was a pretty unfamiliar territory. I'd only really heard about it a month before when the Tonex had released, and to me, that was really, really overwhelmingly daunting, or at least it felt that way. But like I said before, I knew I would have to at least try, so I get out my amp, I start plugging in all of these wires, I go through all the different menu systems and all the different steps, and finally, all these spaceship noises just start going off, and it's crazy, and the process finishes, and I plug in my guitar to check what these tones will actually look like digitally coming from my analog amp, and immediately I notice no sound is coming out and it's not working. Now, I had absolutely no clue what happened or what went wrong. All I knew was that it was getting late. I didn't want to completely destroy my relationship with my neighbors with more spaceship noises, and the day was coming sooner and sooner when I would actually have to return this thing, so I decided to just pack it up and bring it back to my friend. And to be completely honest, I felt like a bit of a failure in that moment, not because I didn't have another video to put out, but because I had found this piece of gear that I had thought about for a long time that had just been stuck in my head, and I really loved it once I actually got to use it, but I feel like I never got the full potential of what it could do or what profiling was even all about. I mean, I used other models like the Helix that I thought were absolutely fantastic. They sounded amazing, but something specifically like the Quad Cortex and like the Kemper that were known as being these incredible profilers, I had never gotten to really form my opinion on those. I guess it just really felt like that mystery that I had seen with that black box on day one. I never would really figure it out. And I didn't want to keep asking over and over and over again for days and weeks and months if I could borrow my friend's thing. I mean, that's his main amp that he takes whenever he does live gigs. So I guess it would just stay a mystery to me. Well, I guess that is until today.
How do you feel about the Princeton as an amp?
Which one?
This is Andrew, and he has a lot of amps, one of which happens to be a limited edition Princeton, and I want to capture it.
How long have you had this Princeton for?
I got it last year. So, I don't know, a year.
Were you?
Actually, I think I got it February last year.
How do you like it?
It's great.
I have to do this because I sold my Princeton last year. I realized Corey Wong plays one, Tim Henson plays one, everyone plays one. This is my first big boy capture. Will I be excommunicated from your studio if I use this SM7B? I've stolen your mics, your assistants, your studio. Now we're going to mic up said amp.
If you have an amplifier that is
Let's start this capture.
Is this ready?
We'll call this Andrew's Princeton. Moment of truth.
All right, so here we are, and I can confidently confirm that our efforts were not in vain. The process went super smoothly. I love the tones that were coming out of it. And even thinking back to the first time when I used the Quad Cortex, when I borrowed my friend's, I still don't really know what happened or what went wrong. Even after going through the process again and seeing all the individual steps, I guess it'll just always be one of those mysteries that I never really find an answer to.
And I think even from the perspective of looking at the captures in comparison to a lot of the different modelers that I use on a regular basis in the Quad Cortex, I do think they react a little bit differently. That may just be the placebo effect of having different knobs and being able to change like the mic placement and what mics you use. Whereas I already recorded Andrew's Princeton with the SM7B, and that's the only standard thing. But I was noticing some slight differences to my ear. But I think that's what makes it really fun, right? The idea that I mic'd it up with an SM7B and thinking back to myself, what would have happened if I would have mic'd it up with a U67 or with a Neumann U87 or any of the crazy mics that Andrew had in there? What would have happened if I would have put the mic's position just a little bit more to the left? And you can always argue those things amongst yourself. And all those different variables are what make capturing so unique. It's like, as much as I am just thinking of myself as a guitar player who's trying to use his friend's amp to get a really good tone in the room, I'm also thinking of myself as an engineer, as a guy who's like trying to get the best sound in the capture, use the best possible mic, and just see how best I can carry this out to different gigs and even just in this room. All that being said, I did have quite a bit of fun, and I was very thankful to Andrew Andrew letting me use his Princeton and his studio and preserve what little relationship I have left with my neighbors. And I'm also thinking to myself on a consistent basis, like, what amps will I want to capture in the future? But in all reality, my experience doesn't matter half as much as yours. So please tell me, have you used a quad Cortex before? Have you captured any amps? What do you think about the idea of profiling as a whole? Please let me know in the comments. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. It's been about a year since the first time I tried with the quad Cortex, and I wanted so badly to be able to do this project again, to be able to see what I thought of it. So this is really exciting for me. If you want to know anything more about this machine right here, I got it from the homies at Sweetwater. The links are in the description. Make sure to check it out. It's one of the best ways to support the channel if that's something you want to do, or if you're just curious about any of the other gear that I used in this video, make sure to check out those links. Also, thank you so much to my patrons. Some extra stuff with Andrew is on there if you want to check it out. Like and subscribe if you had a good time, and most importantly, most important of all, have a fantastic day. If this video gets 1 million likes, I'll capture Rhett Scholl's entire studio.